Hey, welcome back to the podcast. It feels like a couple times a year I get a phone call that I get excited about. And this particular one, Andrew, sitting right across from me here, president of a company called RealScout. If you don't know that company, you should Google it today. He calls and says, I've got this wild idea. What if we put together a really in-depth survey on what all the best and worst and everything in between teams in North America are doing? And let's see if we can get them to answer like 35 in-depth questions about their business. When you and I started talking about this, my brain started popping because there's been other people in the past that have done insights, 5-6 questions, 7-8 questions, commissions, money, yada, yada, yada. For the people that don't know who you are, because we're going to talk about 8 of the insights today, a little sneak peek on this, but it's going to be super valuable for the listener, whether you are wanting to build a team, you have a team, you're a broker, owner, manager who's trying to figure out how to deal with these teams, you are going to love this show. But first, Andrew, who are you? What's RealScout? And what in the world were you thinking with this project? Because this was way more than you thought it was.
Sure. So Andrew Flachner, co-founder and president of RealScout, founded the company 12 years ago out of a problem that I myself had when I was selling real estate. And that was that I had no way to keep my leads and my contacts nurtured. There were national portals that were doing a great job keeping my clients nurtured.
Informed, yes.
But I wasn't able
leads.
to, but they were driving a wedge between my clients and myself. So I wanted to create a way to just nurture my entire database without having to do a lot of effort. That's what RealScout is today. We talk about this notion of a database. A lot of your clients, a lot of people out there struggle with this notion of a database of stale leads. How do you activate them and keep them on the hook? And so recently we've been doing a lot more work with teams. And what we learned about teams is that they are not going anywhere. This is the future of the industry. At the same time, a lot of these teams don't have great benchmarks or data to make decisions. So a lot of them are relying on decent proxies like masterminds. But if you can actually see the data from hundreds and hundreds of your peers and competitors, you can start to get a clearer picture of what strategy should look like.
Yes. So you have this insight, you reach out to me, but there was a lot of people that helped. And I think we should give a shout out to all the companies that helped get the word out, because we got a wide variety of people who were able to answer this survey, which is, I don't think it's ever been done at this scale before.
Yeah, it's unprecedented. Really want to give a shout out to you, Tom, to T360. T360, Tom Ferry, RealScout, those are the producers of the report. But then also there was distribution by tech companies like Realtor.com, Follow Up Boss, Curator, Ojo, Humanize, Agent Image. On the brokerage side, some of the largest and highest growth brokerages like EXP, Real, Side, LPT, Remax, NextHome, leading real estate companies in the world, even agencies like 1000 Watt, Elena Key, Lee Adkins. We had hundreds and hundreds of respondents. Over 500 people responded to the survey. Today, we've crunched the numbers for about 350 of them. So quick disclaimer, this is not, respondents were not chosen randomly. There is sampling bias towards these communities of coaches, CRMs, tech companies that we talked about, but it's a really large sample.
Yes. So we're going through some of the early data, and for the person listening, this is the first time that we've actually got to sit together and actually talk about all the insights. There's 8 different things that we want to talk about today. So I'm going to give you a little heads up for your listening pleasure. Ready? We're going to talk about size of teams. We're going to talk about organization. How do they organize it? Team composition. We're going to look at lead generation on the cost side. Cost per lead to percentage, like if it's a referral, right? We're going to look at compensation averages across the team, which is very insightful. We're going to look at all the different lead sources, and you're going to be shocked to hear. No, you're not going to be shocked. Past client center of influence are the largest, and all these people are buying leads at scale. That's interesting. Give you a little insight. Their 12-month outlook, which I think is fascinating, and of course, lead nurture. And I'm going to share some numbers with you later about how 4 of my clients and 4 non-clients had combined 500,000 people in their database. And we did a little research, and we discovered that 5,161 of the 500,000 people in their database listed and sold with somebody else in the last 12 months for a total of $2.57 billion in sales.
Ouch.
$50 to $70 million in commissions, depending upon the fees that they charge, and how to solve that. So we're going to get to all of that today. So let's start with what did you learn on size?
Sure.
Because there's so many different sizes of teams.
Yeah, that's the starting point, right? Is who filled out this survey.
Yes.
And what we learned is that the median team size was 6, so a lot of smaller teams, but the average was actually around 25. And that is because it is skewed towards a lot of these larger teams. There are teams with hundreds of agents. In fact, there were 2 teams that had 750 agents.
Yes.
So that is,
I know both of them. Yes.
Yeah, because we started with a lot of your clients and we widened the aperture from there.
Yeah.
But I think
give me that again. So the median was 6 or the
median,
average was 6?
The median was 6. The average is 25.
So what does that tell you?
I mean, I think that teams are becoming more prominent. And so a lot of people are forming teams with their peers, with somebody they've worked with in the past. But, I think that we have yet to see the infrastructure required and the process and the best practices to really scale these things.
Right. I look at it as, so just for context, we work with a lot of different teams and I see it like sort of the under 10, right? Like that group. That could be like, 2 brothers that got together, hired their friend and another friend, and then 2 more people. And that's like a very typical team today, right? Family businesses that just expanded. Then there's that group that's like 11 to 25. And that group, we coach a bunch of those people. And they're, in many cases, still the top producing agent, right? They've got a sales leader, they've got an ops leader. And then it goes like 26 to 750. And it's this big group. So what insight did you see when you were looking at the data? And I know we've been looking at a lot of it. What insight did you see beyond the obvious, which is teams are taking over the world?
Well, I think you're in luck because we actually saw a break in the data based on small teams versus larger teams. We saw the break at 1 to 5 agents versus 6+ agents. So a lot of the data we're going to be talking about today is segmented in those 2 buckets, and there's a lot of insights about how these smaller teams operate compared to their larger counterparts. Starting with how teams are organized, because
let's go to number 2. Yes.
Yeah. So teams are organized in different ways. Teams come in all different shapes and sizes. What we found is that smaller teams, more than larger teams, often describe themselves as a singular team. That may mean that they operate off of a singular database. Maybe they have a singular lead pipeline. You can almost think of it like an assembly line.
Yes.
And that skews, again, more often respondents from smaller teams said that's how they operate.
And just for clarification, is that like one dominant agent surrounded by maybe a transaction coordinator, a marketing coordinator, maybe an ISA, and maybe like a buyer agent or 2? But it really is, it's the Andrew Flachner show.
That's right.
And it's one database.
Yeah, that's what I would infer from the data is that you have the epicenter of the team, and then they have a support structure around them.
Yes.
As opposed to when you look at the next category of structure would be agents who work independently. And this is something that both small teams and large teams identified with, which is to say that the team is really just an umbrella, and under the umbrella you have all these individual business owners who operate, on their own. And then what's way more popular with larger teams is a hybrid model. And this is something that we're seeing a lot more of, where you have these large teams, and there is some efficiencies that come with operating as a assembly line, if you will. But also they are recruiting agents who have their own businesses and need some of their own independence. You
know what's interesting? Did you read Brad Jacobs' book, How to Make a Few $1 billion?
No.
It's a killer book. For the person listening, you might say, what's this book about? It's roll-ups. So this guy's had 7 billion-dollar exits. And what he does is he rolls up people and businesses, and then he creates synergy between them by like how large teams are doing it. You only need 1 accounting department. You don't need 10 accounting departments. You need 1 marketing department, not 25 marketing departments for 25 different agents, right? So it's the natural synergies.
Right.
And that's what we see more and more, certainly with those larger teams. But the interesting insight, as you said, some of them are operating independently and some of them are maybe getting most of their business from the team lead. So that's interesting. Any other insights just on that?
No, I think that, by the way, any one of these insights, you can probably do an entire survey on, entire mastermind around. But at the surface level, that's where we're at right now.
Just for context for the person listening, October 7th is when we release the full report. What's the website again?
Theteamsreport.com, and the mechanism we're using...
Teams, plural. Theteamsreport.com.
Theteamsreport.com. And the mechanism, to get all this data, you have to complete the survey yourself. So if you want just the highlights, you can download the highlights with just a few clicks. But if you want the full unencumbered data set, then complete the survey, contribute to the data pool.
So I go back to every broker manager anywhere in North America, and all my friends in Europe, all my friends in Australia, all my friends in South Africa, all my friends everywhere in the world. We have clients in 29 countries. That's not fair. I can't name them all. You should read this report. And it'd be worthwhile for you to answer the questions just to get access to the report, because one of the biggest complaints I hear, not complaints, one of the biggest worries, frustrations that I hear from broker owners, especially large companies, independents, they all say the same thing. Like, I struggle with teams because I don't understand them. I don't know how to work with them. I don't know how to deal with them. I don't understand the finances behind it. So what they do is they, in many cases, just shun them. This is a way for them to like put the light on it and really understand it.
Right. And, I don't paint myself as like the singular expert on teams. We actually came up with a lot of these questions by talking to the teams and asking them, like, what do you want to know about your neighbor, your peer, your competitor? And that's how we formulated a lot of these questions.
So go to number 3, team composition.
Yeah.
What were you looking to learn here, and what did you learn?
Well, we learned a lot more than we thought we would. What we learned is that there is like a hierarchy of needs. As a team grows in size, there are going to be additional hires that you want to make. 91% of respondents have non-agents on their team, meaning support staff,
salaried employees,
et cetera. So the top 3 non-agent roles, marketing, transaction management, and accounting. That's not on its own too interesting. But when you look at teams with more than 6 agents, they're much more likely than smaller teams to have admin, ISAs, ops, sales managers. And this hierarchy of needs started to appear, meaning you can almost tell the sequence at which these teams are going to start making their hires. It's almost like an order of operations.
Yes.
And what we found is that marketing seems to be the first reason to expand your team, then transaction management, then admin and finance, and only then scale with ISAs and customer acquisition.
Yes.
So
then like sales manager to help manage it all.
That's right. And so this was surprising to me. I thought ISAs would have come a little earlier, but I suspect it's because of what you said earlier, is that there's like an epicenter, like the face of the team, and they are the epicenter of client connection and communication, and they only hire ISAs once scale is absolutely necessary. So they're going to be the ones talking to these clients until they reach that point of 6 or more agents, and they really want to get out there and scale.
Yes. I know we're going to get into averages, but at least today we probably won't touch on like commission percentages of how agents get paid. That's going to be in the more full report, correct?
Yeah, we will cover averages in terms of what the average agent is earning, but not splits.
Okay, that's fair. All right, so interesting. So you could literally, so it would be fun. I mean, okay, we're doing this right now live, and I'm seeing the data for the first time. He's seen it a couple times. We're going through this together. So if it feels a little clunky at times, just roll with it. What I think is, it'd be interesting for us to actually create like a visual of the team begins, and the first thing they do is this, and then they do this, and then they do this, and you can almost show based on transaction count or volume why they're hiring this next person. But the next time we do this, we have to ask the question, should you have hired that person sooner?
That's right.
Because I bet most of them, and it'd be fun, if you're watching this right now, put in the comments, be honest. When you hired that last person or that next person, did you hire it because you were building to get to the next level, or are you doing it because you were at a capacity and your team was going insane? I'd just be really curious. Please put it in the comments.
Yeah, there's also a question about best practices in terms of order of operations. But generally, are you hiring when it hurts, or are you forward investing? And I think depending on your market, depending on your growth, depending on so many circumstances, I think there's advice that either one of those categories could be the right option.
I love it. I love it. Okay, well, we're gonna move away from that. Let's talk about lead generation. Let's talk about cost per lead, and do we have insight on what percentage they're paying out in referral fees? So Zillow Flex, Realtor.com, Open Door, any one of the referral models.
Yeah, absolutely. So the insight that I got from lead gen is that the bigger teams are willing to spend more for volume, even if the unit economics get worse. And I'll explain what that means. I'll unpack that.
Say that again.
Yeah. The larger teams are willing to spend more for volume, even if the unit economics get worse, meaning even if margins shrink, they are going to continue to plow capital into their business. And by the way, I don't think that's a bad thing. We'll get into why. So first off, let's start with cost per lead. This is trading dollars for leads. Small teams said that they would spend less than $20 cost per lead twice as often as larger teams. Right, so at the lower end of the scale, paying pennies for leads, small teams more likely to do that than larger teams.
Yeah,
large teams on the other hand, like we have one category on here. Do you spend more than $500 per lead? And larger teams are doing that, are responded 3 times as often in that category.
Yeah.
right?
Shocked.
Yeah, not shocked. And there's a reason there's a question about, cause versus effect here, and we can go into that.
But also, if you're just looking at like the funnel of leads, you can generate a lot of low cost leads way top of the funnel. But if you start getting down to the bottom, I don't care if it's Google, Zillow, wherever you're getting it from, it's going to be more expensive.
Right.
Right. There's less of them. It's going to be more expensive. So so it sounds like the bigger teams are focusing here, and some of these guys are maybe filling up their database with opportunities that over time might nurture and close.
Right. And then we'll get to in a few slides, is that the right strategy? And do they have the systems in place with all those cheaper, shallow intent leads, that they have the systems to convert them? Similar thing we're seeing on referrals, by the way. So small teams said that they spend less than 25% referral fee twice as often as the large teams. And when it comes to the 35% category, large teams pay 35% 3 times as often as small teams from the respondent data. So large teams are spending more on both a cost per lead basis and a referral fee basis than smaller teams. And the same, go ahead.
Are we going to break down in the more detailed report what percentage of their business is referral fee paid versus non?
We are.
Because that's, I do it, we do it on our clients. And for the person watching, I just say, just listen, every agent out there, I say, how much are you willing to pay to get a closing? And they go, $500, $1,000. I go, you're lying. You'll pay 25% to 35% every day of the week for an agent-to-agent referral.
Right.
But I just don't want you to have more than, say, 30% of your business be that.
Exactly.
You want to do more deals with like less cost, higher margin. But I can't wait to get the report and see like what the percentages are. Because we know some of them, it's 75, 80% of their business. And we know others, it's 15, 20% of their business.
And we're going to be releasing, our commentary, our analysis, but then we're also going to have all of the raw data in there as well, like all the reports, or the charts and graphs, so you can make your own inferences based on that.
Yeah, love it.
And we're taking feedback for the next report, so I think we can go a lot deeper on some of those categories.
We should add on the site what other questions, what else do you? Because
that is part of the survey.
Okay, because 35 is a lot, right? People are saying to me, okay, I got the survey. This took me like 35, 40 minutes to answer, and we're like, thank you and God bless you.
Well, what's interesting about that is that when I actually shadowed people while they were completing the survey, which takes about 20, 30 minutes, they said, I would take the survey for hours because every single question that I'm answering, I want to know the answer to.
Exactly. I heard the same thing. Okay, so other thoughts around cost of leads.
Well, this dovetails nicely into the next category, which is compensation, because compensation is a proxy for cost per acquisition.
Yes.
Right. So I think that's a wrap on the lead gen piece of it. Although we go into
we're going to go lead sources in a minute.
That's right. But when it comes to compensation, we're seeing the same thing. These large teams are compensating their agents and their staff more than smaller teams. So this, by the way, this is a big differentiator for large teams because they have the capability to, you could even call it over-investing or hurting their unit economics because they'll make up for it in the efficiencies they have throughout their organization. Correct. And they are prioritizing growth in a way that's probably a little less disciplined in some ways than smaller teams. So this is some of my conjecture, but looking at the data, what we're seeing is that larger teams, here we are, larger teams are actually spending more on licensed ISAs, unlicensed ISAs, and then what's really interesting is average agent compensation, right? You can see the pattern on the screen here. Average agent compensation, team leads who say their average agents make less than $100,000 a year are coming largely from smaller teams. The team leads who filled this out and, on average are saying $125,000 to $175,000 average comp per agent, those are on the larger teams. Yes. So I think the question for everyone at home and maybe for you too is this because the agents are more likely to make more money at these bigger teams, they're more set up for success, or is it that these larger teams are hiring the top producing agents, so of course they're going to make more money?
So I know we're going to break down in the more detailed, what's the average time people have been with you. What we know today, so listen up, because I don't know if this is going to be in the data. What we know today is it takes to fully bake a salesperson on a team from brand new to like whatever wildly successful is for you, it's about 3 years. takes a year before they really understand, like, you gave me a client, I'm showing them a house, I'm writing an offer, I know how to negotiate. It's a year. It could be like really 12 months before they got that.
Right.
So the second part is, I think the reason why they're making so much more is the infrastructure that the large team can afford to have. So they're going to have human eyes, and they're going to have a sales manager who's going, Andrew, let's look at your pipeline. How are you following up? What are you doing? What are the 3 most important clients you need to go after this week? So they're going to be doing more of those kind of activities. Plus the agent's probably doing less of the minutia. So all they have to do is go work with clients. So I think there's a lot of different factors that come into play for the people that are, like, let's just say the larger teams. They have more infrastructure, they have more people there to support the people to be more successful. I think that's probably the biggest factor.
That's right. And I imagine this varies, larger teams versus smaller teams.
Sure.
They're going to approach this differently. They're going to have different benchmarks. Yep. One insight.
Okay, but in fairness, the gal I just interviewed, Edna Kimball, has 2 other people on her team. And between the 3 of them, they do 360 sales a year. So
yeah,
there are some outliers like Edna that are just wildly productive, and 200 listings sold out of, say, 360 transactions.
And we should study that, because I'm not saying that all these smaller teams should look up for inspiration or guidance from the larger teams. No. The opposite may be true on some of this stuff.
Right. Difference in profitability, difference in time, difference in stress levels.
Even going back to the team organization and structure, like this idea of operating as a supply chain or as a production line, there might be some tenets from that are really valuable in any team business. And if you're just an umbrella of all these individual agents, you might be losing some of the magic that makes teams more efficient.
Bingo.
One other insight on
the compensation.
Actually, just going real quick to cost per lead.
Yes.
This is an insight that I wanted to share. When we were looking at this data, we thought to ourselves, well, maybe this is contributing. The notion that larger teams are spending more on a unit economic basis might be the reason why cost per acquisition on leads is going up in general. So you have to decide, if you're a smaller team or if you're an individual agent, do you want to play that game? Do you have the operational expertise to operate with those smaller margins?
Yes.
And it's something to think about.
The other thing, just on that note really fast, if you're out there and you're buying online leads in any source, we've done a lot of research on this. The median time to close, right, currently, so let me restate this. Currently, the last time we did this would have been November of last year. It was 111 days. That number is way longer now. I would say safely it's 130 days.
Wow.
So we're spending more money on leads, and it's taking longer to close them, which I know we're going to talk about lead nurture at the very end, but stick around, pay attention, because all the money is made after the 6-month mark.
That's right.
And most people quit after the first month. Right. That's what all of our data shows. It's frightening. Okay? So let's keep going. Let's talk about lead sources. So do we have a value rank of all the lead sources? I know the big aha we talked about in the very intro was the vast majority of their business is coming from their database.
I mean, it's almost comical if you look at the chart here. I mean, the sphere of influence is by far the most important lead source. I'm just going to say it again because this chart is so ridiculous.
Yes.
Sphere of influence is by far the most important lead source. It doesn't matter if you're a big team. It doesn't matter if you're a small team. Yeah. That is the data, and it's worth noting here that on a side note, a lot of the larger teams are buying more leads than the smaller teams, obviously. But it's really about SOI. It's really about sphere of influence. It's really about
that makes me happy.
Yeah,
it doesn't make Zillow happy or Realtor.com or something, but that makes me really happy.
By the way, it's not to say that some of these past clients didn't come from another lead source, but it costs a lot less to retain a client you already have than to buy a new one. So, but here's the really shocking thing about this part of the report. There's a lot of sphere of influence business, but there's not a lot of infrastructure behind it. So I think that leads us into the next section on lead nurture.
So I want to talk about something first, and I shared this at the summit. So you were busy helping hundreds and thousands of agents. So listen up carefully. I took 4 clients. One is one of the biggest teamerages, in the U.S., and then 3 other clients, and then I took 4 non-clients to try and get a sample size understanding. So here was my hypothesis. I believe that the average agent, when they list a house, lose 3. That's just been in the back of my mind always. And I've done some studies on this where I took someone's like a cohort of leads, like a 90-day, like every lead that they got. And you watch as they go to their different salespeople, and then the salespeople say these leads suck, and they end up back usually in the team leader's name. And then all of a sudden we look and say, wow, there was 4,000 leads in that quarter, as an example. This is a big team. 4,000 leads, and there's like 2,800 now in the crappy, bucket that no one wants to work. And 195 sales came out of that.
Right.
They just didn't go to the agent that paid for them. They went to everybody else. So I did a little experiment. I went to my buddy Chris Dreher. Shout out to Chris, who's the CEO of a company called Revaluate. You might want to check it out. Revaluate. I don't own them. I wish I did. Chris, if you're listening, let's do a deal. So check this out. We took 500,000 records. So this is from 8 different people, 500,000, couple teams, right? Obviously, 500,000 records. We discovered a couple things. One, half the records had a mailing address. The other half didn't. 175,000 of them did not have an email address, and like 70,000 didn't even have a phone number to call, but they're in their database. So we could only then do an analysis on the 250,000 at an address. So we take it into the title records, right, into the tax rolls, and here's what we discovered. In the last 12 months of the 500,000 people in their database, only 250,000 that we have actual data on, because we can say, did these people transact? 5,161 listings lost in the last 12 months inside of their database. And these are all amazing agents. I mean, even the 4 that I picked that are non-clients, they're good. 5,161 listings lost, $2.57 billion, because we see the actual dollar amount, $2.57 billion in volume lost. This is just on the list side, not on the buy side. $50 to $70 million in commissions lost. Every listing they took, they lost 4. Every listing they took, they lost 4. So we're going to talk about lead nurture, which could be the most important thing. Then we got to do the 12-month outlook.
Sure.
So what did we learn? I know when I shared that at the summit, Andrew, people were just like this. Like you saw this like wrestling, their eye patterns are bouncing all over the place. You just see their brain spinning because they're like, I've made $800,000 in commissions, but based on what they're telling me, I've lost, $2 million. Like that was very normal. So what did we learn in lead nurture?
Well, everything you just said is not very surprising to me because I'm in the lead nurture business. I mean, our customers, they come to us because they have realized that and they're tired of talking to people in their database, after the fact saying, hey, Tom, how you doing? Oh, I'm great. I just sold my house.
Yeah. Hey, we want to invite you to the housewarming party. You're
right.
like, oh.
Yeah. So that's why we have a business.
Yeah.
But, the data actually backs that up, right? So, despite sphere of influence and referrals being such an important part of the business, when we ask people about the state of their lead nurture systems, yikes. We asked them, do you have a basic system? Do you have an advanced system, or do you have no system at all?
Yeah.
And 60% of people said they either have a basic system or not any system at all, which means they're probably doing it manually, or let's be real, they're just not doing it at all.
No, they're saying, why? I send an email once a month.
Right.
That's not lead nurture.
And also, to your average person in your database, it's not once a month. It's like once every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So, we also asked how happy people are with their lead nurture platforms. And a third of them rated their happiness at 5 out of 10 or worse.
Yeah.
And only a quarter of them said 9 or 10 out of 10. So this is a big problem.
We don't have a lead problem. We have a lead nurture problem.
Bingo.
We have a marketing problem.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. And, it's something we think a lot about. And this was a conversation I had time and time again at Summit because, I was meeting with a lot of your coaches and, your coaches are preaching lead nurture as they should be. And a big part of lead nurture is the ZMA strategy where you take a screenshot of somebody's Zillow listing and say, hey, Tom, it's been a couple of years since you purchased your home. Zillow thinks your home is worth $1.2 million. You have $200,000 of appreciation. I have my thoughts. What are yours?
Exactly.
That is going to get a response almost every time.
It does.
The question is, after that initial text, which takes some effort, not very much, but it does take some effort, then that's the hook, but how do you keep them on the line?
Yes.
And we have recommended different systems. We've built a system of our own. We have home value alerts, but there's other systems out there. One of the things that we learned is that if you can put some of this on autopilot, right, keep them on the line by sending out these monthly reports on your home's value, and also just make sure you choose a product that mirrors the ZMA strategy. So for our home value alerts, what we do is we actually include the Zestimate because, love it or hate it, Zillow is a verb and people are going to Zillow to see their home's value.
Yep.
But put it next to another AVM, another value estimate to create some tactical confusion, some curiosity where the consumer says, Zillow thinks my home is worth 1.2 million. This other company thinks it's worth 1 million. I need to reach out to Tom to make sense of the market. And there's even like a little, almost like a digital post-it note that says, hey, there's some discrepancy between these numbers. Reach out to me for a professional opinion. So when we actually looked at the data, we're finding that for our customers that do this with these home value alerts, our median customer is getting 67% of their database to engage within 90 days. So let me say that again. 67% of the database to engage within 90 days of launching. Imagine what would happen if you had 67% of your database re-engage. Now, maybe you're a pessimist and you say, well, listen, I think that I'm going to perform worse than 75% of RealScout's customers. You'd still be at 40%.
Yes.
And this is so extreme for some people. Like one of your coaching clients, Jason Wright in Southern California, he implemented this, and within 24 hours, he had 700 people interact with his
raise
account.
Their hand. And,
that's what they are. These are hand raises. Not every one of them is going to list.
Yes.
But he had, at the 48-hour mark, he had a $3 million listing from it.
Yes.
And like you said, these are listings that would have gone to someone else, but he was able to flip a switch and engage them.
What I love about this, and you guys do a great job, and there's some email campaigns. I mean, like the most advanced, like Salesforce stuff, Drips, all these different programs. I love them all because how much time would it have taken Jason to call 700 people?
Right.
But he had to call 4,000, right, to actually maybe talk to 400, 500 versus automation. Boom.
Let them raise their hand.
Exactly.
But I think the tactical curiosity part is really important because some of these home value alerts, they have one value. And what we learn in talking to customers, talking to homeowners, is that if you give me one value, you tell me my home is worth $1 million.
Yep.
Two things are going to happen. One is either I think you are way off and you look like you lose a lot of credibility, or what may be even worse is I think you're right. And if I think my home's worth $1 million, I don't have a reason to reach out to you to spark a conversation. So if you have some, this feeling in your gut saying, I don't want to send my client an AVM from the portals, do that, but explain that an algorithm is not the best sense of what your home is worth and they should reach out to a professional to make sense of the market.
You know this. Most best agents will show up on a listing appointment like, here's the comps, here's the recent, here's that, and then here's the Zestimate.
Right.
Right. And they bring it in because they can play off that Zestimate. Like, you want a Zestimate or a Bestimate? Like, which one do you want? Right. So I think that's super insightful. So reiterate for me again, because there was so much inside of lead nurture.
Right.
I bet the average, so I'd be curious for the person watching right now. Lots of insight here. If you're on my YouTube channel, how many people do you have in your database? Just type in that number. Mm-hmm. Type in that number. My hallucination. So here's the most recent stat. 6% of the people in their database are going to transact in the next 12 months.
Right.
So if you're thinking like right now, if I grab my phone, I know I've got like 8,900 contacts, and those are all people I know, right? Forget the database of customers that we have, right? So if I was looking at that, I'd be like 6% of those people are going to transact. How in God's name am I going to have enough conversations versus automation to figure out who's thinking about it?
Right. Well, and keep in mind that these are buyers and sellers, and the vast majority of them are actually not buyers or sellers. They're somewhere in between those buying and selling moments, and they want to know, what is my home worth? What listings are hitting the market? What does my neighbor house just sell for? And guess what? It's not like they're not getting the information.
Bingo.
But they're also not going to your website. They're probably going to Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com.
Of course.
And so if you can intercept that, if you can be that epicenter of client activity and inquiry, then you're going to be thought of more often. I will warn you, though.
Check out RealScout. Check out RealScout. Check out RealScout.
I mean, it can be overwhelming, though, right? Like Jason Wright, as soon as he had all this activity, he said, oh man, I got to manage this activity. He actually ended up hiring people to field all these inquiries.
Yes.
So that's a good problem to have. That's turning on the revenue button.
Quality problem.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so we talked about size, the medium size 6. We talked about organization. We talked about composition, right? And I think it's I can't wait for the detailed report of sort of the first they did this, then they did this, then they to see that growth pattern is going to be fascinating. We talked about cost per lead. We talked about percentage of referral fees, compensation averages, lead sources, lead nurture, which is monster. I'm telling you, you do not have a lead problem. You have a lack of nurture problem. You have a lack of meaningful conversations. Send 10 Zillow's estimates a day between now and the end of the year, and you will thank me in January because you will have more listings and more sales than you know what to do with. We know that works.
Yep.
The last one is the 12-month outlook.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here 97 days before the end of the year. Here's a fun one. 41 days before the election in the U.S. I'm telling everybody, you better get it all done between now and the election cycle.
Right.
I'm going to make so for my Canadian friends and around the world, don't worry about it. But Canada, you guys get it next year. I'm telling my besties, the worst case scenario is half the country's pissed. You with me? Just, and it's probably a third, right? With independence and everything else. But let's just say half the country's pissed.
You said that's worst case scenario?
I'm going for the worst case scenario.
It's also the best case scenario.
I don't want it to be, but I don't want it to be the most likely scenario because it gets worse. Half the country's pissed, and that means half your buyers and sellers are now putting things on hold, right? And we know leading up to the first week before the election, things stall. It's like before any major holiday. We know the week of the election, it's going to stall, right? And there's a good chance that the week after the election, it's going to stall. And if half the people are pissed, it could stall all the way through U.S. Thanksgiving. So I'm literally sitting with a bunch of my besties and saying, Andrew, there's a good chance that November is going to be a bust. I'm not planning for it. I'm going to work my face off. And then what happens? It's December. If you're in the Northeast, the whole world slows down. It goes down by like 17% on average, transaction count. If that happens, right, it's kind of a scary proposition. I'm telling everybody, load the cannons, market like crazy, nurture like crazy, talk to your customers, get everything reduced and get it sold. Get it all done as fast as you can. Thoughts?
I think it's good advice. I think that, we specifically asked people about their outlook over the next 12 months. So, we didn't ask them, over the next 3 months or the next 30 days.
Sure.
But when it comes to the upcoming election,
yeah.
when it comes to the NAR settlement, when it comes to the cost per lead, when it comes to inventory, any one of these items, 70% of teams think that those outcomes are going to be good for their business or neutral for their business.
2025. Right?
Yeah, the next 12 months, right? There's going to be some turbulence, right? But 70% of these teams think that any one of those items is going to be either neutral or positive for their business.
Correct.
And what was, I think not surprising is that when it comes to interest rates, 3 out of 4 agents think that that's going to be good for them in the next 12 months.
I agree.
But I just think ending on a really positive note here, when you look at the 12-month outlook, we asked teams how optimistic they are about their own growth in terms of revenue.
Yeah.
3/4 of them say that they're going to see a 10% or more year-over-year growth in their business. Only 2.5% saying that they're going to expect negative growth. So I like to see the optimism. I think it's a sign of the market. I think it's a sign of people being ready to turn the page, and that's where we find ourselves now.
I love it. So I do want to say, Monday I had David Childers from KCM talk to this group of 41 team leaders, 240 transactions on average, and one Canadian in the room and one guy, Matt Nichols, who's one of the top brokerages in all of the UK, and basically said, look, this year we know what it is, right? We know the transaction count. So even though I'm telling you, like, I am slightly nervous about the US and what could happen in November, I am extremely bullish on 2025. We know that only 2 of the presidential elections that have happened out of the last 11, right? Only 2 transactions were flat, all 9 other ones. So we know next year's going to be a big year. We also know interest rates are getting lower and we're going to have 2 more cuts. 2025 is going to be a monster year. It's not going to be 2021, but it's going to be like 2018, 2019, which were incredible years in real estate. So Please don't take my angst and nervousness for my clients as anything other than be urgent between now and the election and be really communicative with all of your clients between now and the end of the year. Like I'm telling them, holiday parties like you've never done it before, events like you've never done. You got to get in front of way more people and then plan on 2025 being nuts.
Well, I think when it comes to like a ZMA or automating that with home value alerts, there's more anxiety around what your home is worth and how that will change over the next few months than there has been in a very long time. So
1,000%.
be on top of that.
Jimmy Mackin, my partner in Listing Leads, just published something yesterday that was another text you might want to consider. Test this and let me know what you think. It was basically, like, hey, Andrew, have you seen what happened to the rates? Have the new interest rates had any or created any change for you in terms of housing in 2025?
Yep.
Just that.
Yeah, any changes?
Any changes?
Yeah, any changes to your real estate plans?
Right, in 2025, just because of the rate drop. The other one is every person you sold a house to with a 7 or an 8 or a high 6 interest rate, you need to be, as their best agent, reaching out and saying, hey, let's talk about refinancing. Let's get you guys in a better position. Like if you're doing that, like that's the best nurture on the planet today for anybody who sold a house to in the last 18 to 24 months.
Yep.
All right. Closing thoughts. This was I can't wait How many pages is this report going to be?
It's still being written.
Right. So more than 10.
More than 10.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 10 pages
Yes.
here just for these top 8 highlights.
Yes.
Closing thoughts. If you run a team, double down on the things that make you more team-y, meaning what are the efficiencies you can unlock? So I think there's some interesting insights here. We talked about one earlier, like can you scale more quickly because you have that efficiency, because you can invest more in your business? SOI, rule supreme. So, most people are not thrilled with their lead nurture platforms. How are you going to make a change there and invest in your business? Big opportunity there.
Yep. Clean up the data too in your database. Get all the emails, get all the mailing addresses, get all the phone numbers.
That's right.
Data appending.
And I think just related to that, ending on the positive note here, I mean, a lot of people are anticipating growth in their business, but they're probably underestimating the systems and infrastructure they need to support that growth.
Yes.
But yeah, the entire report will be available for download, theteamsreport.com. For anyone who's interested in automating the ZMA, just learn.realscout.com/Tom Ferry for the Tom Ferry pricing.
Give that one more time.
learn.realscout.com/Tom Ferry, and we can put these in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Thank you, man, so much for that. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, and like I'm a proud investor in RealScout. So just for be clear, proud investor. But you reached out 120 days ago and said, I got a crazy idea. And now here we are. So congratulations, man. I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. Appreciate all the support.
All right. Well, let us know what you think. If you're not following Andrew on all the different social channels, highly recommend it. And make sure you make the note, October 7th. That's when we're going to start releasing this report. So get ready. Let me know in the comments. What did you learn? What questions you have? What were the insights? We'll see you on the next show.